Anyway, Jurgen Spangel works for Atlassian in the Sydney office. He leads all of design at Atlassian. He's really, really hyper-focused on bringing the human element into everything that we do. So he's going to talk a lot about that today. With all that being said, I'll get over to him. So Jurgen.
Cool. Thanks, Dan. Can you guys hear me? Good? Okay, good. Good afternoon, everyone. And this is actually the last talk, so I thought we'd get some energy in the room and do another stretch o'clock. So I'd like you all to get up. Get all up, guys. Okay. See everyone up. No one can run away. Okay, get your hands up and breathe in. And a deep exhale and all the way down. And we do this one more time. Breathe in. And exhale all the way up. Brilliant. How are you guys feeling? So, awesome. Keep standing. No, we're not sitting down yet. I actually like you to sit you down in groups. And the first question what I have to you, all people who follow an agile methodology, might it be Scrum or Kanban, please keep standing. All the others sit down. Okay, that's pretty awesome. That's about 95%. Good. Next question. If you got a designer on your team, please keep standing, otherwise sit down. Okay, so that's about half the team, even a little bit more. That's pretty awesome. I actually expected about 20%. So I'm pretty impressed how many people already have a designer on the team. So by now you all can sit down. Thanks for playing this game with me. So my talk is around playing as a team. And what I want to share is the journey we went through of getting designers into an agile team. And as I said before, I actually would love to hear from you guys at the end of the talk how you did this, because I wasn't expecting 50% of people still standing with designers on their team. So what I will talk you through, what we went through over the last 1.5 to 2 years to get designers involved in our teams, and more importantly, how could we get the teams aligned towards a unified vision so that we can deliver the best experience for our users, for our customers, which is actually you. So and before I jump in there, I quickly wanted to introduce myself, but Dan did already a good job. So I'm Jurgen. Hi, everyone. Originally from Austria, but now in Australia, the only country where they don't mix up Austria and Australia. And I'm the head of design. And together with my awesome team, we're responsible for the design of all our products and all our services. So before we jump in there, I'd like to set the context a little bit. And Atlassian is an agile shop, full end. And I wanted us to recap on the Agile Manifesto, what it actually stands for. And it's very good to constantly kind of like play it back to yourself, what it actually means. So the Agile Manifesto states, individuals and interactions over process and tools. Working software over comprehensive documentation. Customer collaboration over contract negotiation. Responding to change over following a plan. So in a nutshell, what this means is bringing the guy on the left here, which is our product owner, a lot closer to the guy on the right, our developers. So they form a close team. It's all about collaboration with the purpose to continuously deliver value to our customers. And that's awesome. That's great. But there's one challenge in there. If you have a product owner in there, which is in most cases a customer and very business-minded, you actually get all your business needs addressed, but very often you miss the needs for your end users, your end customers, and the people who actually use your software day in, day out. And all the designers are usually about the end users. And it gets interesting when those guys actually crash the party of the agile teams, and how do you get them involved there? The interesting thing with designers and design processes, or user-centered design processes, it's very similar to an agile process. Usually designers go out, research, understand better what are the needs for our customers, our end users. Then they start designing, building prototype quickly, and then quickly go out again to our customers and validate this. And we do this over and over again. So although those two processes are very similar, very iteratively, the whole industry still struggles of getting them involved and working closely together nicely. So do we. So that's one of our first challenges we want to look into. The other one is this one. So this is our R&D team, about 370 people. Most of them are engineers. So the whole R&D team is engineers, QA, product manager, designers. But we only have about 20 designers. So how can we ensure that we don't bottleneck all of those engineers out there? How can we scale design? And the challenge what we face is that even though we hired a lot of designers over the last 2 years, and we're still hiring heavily, we can't keep up. Designers will be a bottleneck over the next few years for 2 reasons. One, technology is that far advanced that differentiating purely by features is not a competitive advantage anymore. So it moves a lot more to experience. And also Apple, Amazon, and all those products help kind of like making experience and design more important. So that's one challenge. More and more people actually focusing on the experience side. On the other hand, design education didn't keep up with the demand. So design education is fairly broken from a skill set perspective, what kind of skills we actually need, and also from a volume perspective. And also this gets addressed already. Over the next few years, we for sure won't be able to actually remove this bottleneck. So we ask ourselves the question, how can we make everyone a better designer? So that was challenge number 2. Challenge number 3, Agile is awesome in delivering continuously to our customers and being very iterative. But very often we face this problem, where are we heading towards? What's the bigger vision? What's the bigger picture here? So we struggled to set the bigger picture for our teams so that we have an aligned vision to continuously deliver against it. So this was challenge number 3. So to recap quickly those 3 challenges, what we tried to address. Number 1 is, how do we get designers involved in Agile teams? Number 2, how can we actually scale design across the whole company or across whole teams? And number 3, how can we align teams on a unified vision? So what we didn't need at Atlassian was yet another process. And to share the full truth, Atlassian is actually fairly lightweight on processes. So it was more kind of like, well, go away with any process. And the interesting thing about processes is, processes are underrated and overrated at the same time. If you have too little process, you have pure chaos and you don't know how to work together. And the interesting thing is, the Agile Manifesto is actually very strong on very few processes and you live it very rigorously. On the other hand, if you have too many processes, you stifle innovation and you don't move forward anymore. So we face the same problem. So how do we address this? So we started to look, how do we actually work as a company? And Atlassian is focusing very strongly on their values. And I believe that's one of the key reasons why we are successful and what makes us actually a strong company. And one of our values is play as a team. And when you take this actually apart, you have 2 parts in there. Play, so what we mean by this is kind of like hang out together, go out there, have fun. But play means also don't take yourself too serious, experiment, fall, roll forward. And the other part is play as a team. It's all about the team. How can we enable and empower team to trust each other, to respect each other? So how can we form those strong teams? And that's pretty much all what the whole company is also focused about. How can we enable those teams to play well together? So given this, we were looking outside other disciplines, how are other teams, people doing this? And then we started exploring sports teams. And what sport teams actually have is, they got playbooks. So you see this here, the coach has a playbook in his hand, and then the football player has the playbook on his hand as well. And they constantly think how they actually work together and how they play together. And this is true for pretty much all team sports. So you have this in soccer, you have this in ultimate frisbee, you have this in football. They all do these things. But of course, this doesn't happen magically. There's a lot of training involved and understanding the plays. And when I actually talk to people who have more clue than I have about football, they ask me, why did you put the 49ers in there? They're actually not doing that great. So one of the reasons why I put them in there, it was pretty much the only high-res photo I could find showing off a team and playbooks. And the other reason was, well, I don't have a silver bullet to actually solve all of this, and no one else actually have. But for us, it was one key thing which actually enabled us to move forward. So that's why I wanted to share the Playbook thing. So we took this further, and we doubled down and play as a team. And we started to building up the Atlassian Design Playbook. And next to Atlassian Design Guidelines, which you heard more about from, or which you heard already about from Matt, 2 talks previously, we came up with this Atlassian Design Playbook. Those are the 2 key things which help us create good experiences. So what is this playbook? So the Atlassian Design Playbook summarizes how we work as designers and lets us share it with the whole company. There are simple things in there, kind of like a persona workshop, design studio, experience canvas workshop. That's actually what we will focus on throughout the rest of the talk. The experience canvas, what is it? But what is a single play? A little single play has simple things in there, kind of like who should you invite to the workshop? How do you prep the room? How long should the session be? What's a run sheet for the session? How do you wrap up the session? How do you document the session? What should you do next? So those simple things, they're not as rigid as a process because they're all free-floating, but they give you enough guidance to enable everyone to facilitate good workshops and to bring a designerly approach to the teams. So now that I introduced the playbook a little bit, I'd like to focus on one of the key plays, which is the experience canvas. And I'd like to talk through the experience canvas in more details because this experience canvas helped us to align the teams early on and also introduce them more to designerly methods. The interesting thing about the experience canvas is it's a different form of a documentation. It's not a spec, it's not a roadmap, it's actually nothing in between. It's very lightweight to bring things to the fore as a team and then also allows you to document these things very lightweight. So before, or instead of me talking through this thing theoretically, let's jump in and let's play. So I'd like you to talk you through a real example and share how the experience canvas works. So about a year ago, it started last summit. We learned that people struggle to understand Confluence. They didn't know what to use it for. They saw other people kind of like, hey, you got this awesome content there. How do you actually come up with this? So what we realized is we were throwing them into the deep end. So they struggled a lot. So we took this on and started exploring this a little bit more. Internally, we started calling this the blank page problem. And so we set up an experience canvas workshop. So one of the designers or the team lead actually organized this. And I'd now like to talk you through how you fill this in and how you work through this together. So you can imagine kind of like usually you have a team of 5, 7 people. And we work through this together in a workshop of 2 hours, 4 hours, depends on the problem. In this case, it's a larger problem, probably 4 hours. And I just want to walk you through how you usually would go through in a bit of a more high speed. So we start with the problem area. And the reason why we start with the problem area is we're a company with many smart people and very engineering focused. And usually problems get communicated very often in a solution or in an outcome way already. I'd love to have blah, blah, blah. So what we wanted to get people to focus on is actually truly understand what problem do we have at hand here. So we list all the challenges, analytics, assumptions, whatever we have. So in this case, for the blank page problem is, well, we have the blank page problem. People don't know how to deal with an empty page. Also, users didn't know how to use Confluence for or where to start. The other problem what we have is, I saw someone else doing this stuff. How can I get this stuff as well? So those were, like in a nutshell, the problems we had. Of course, initially we had way more, and then we consolidated them down even further and further. After this one, we jump into the hypothesis. And the hypothesis is all about kind of like how might we do something to reach this outcome. So it's different to kind of like stating a requirement. It's way more a question and asking this question out loud. The key part of the hypothesis is it should be solution agnostic. And being solution agnostic is very hard. So usually working through the hypothesis will take a couple of rewrites. You need to go over this and over again, and you need to get used how to write this. And the reason why I'm calling this out, because it sounds easy, and I'll share the hypothesis we had for the blank page problem in a second. It actually, you need to practice it and actually keep doing it and not stop too early. So the hypothesis we came up with was, we think that showing users what types of pages they can create and guiding them throughout the process will encourage them to create, share, and collaborate more. So this sounds simple, but it took quite a while to get there. So now to the more easier parts of the experience canvas. On the very right-hand side, we have the personas. The personas is all about who is our target audience, who are we building this for, and especially Confluence. Confluence is so broad. It gets used from product managers over tech writers to developers to intranets to actually public-facing websites, so it's all over the place. So in this instance, we built this for Alana, and Alana is actually, internally we have a persona set, a persona library within Atlassian, where we can draw on who are we building this for, and this is all built by user research and constantly gets enriched so that we understand our customers and user better. So Alana is your product manager, very driven. She runs a team and wants to get the product shipped. She's very driven. She wants to get out there. She doesn't want to waste time in kind of like, how do I get a page going? How do I get meeting minutes? Just make it happen. And the other persona we focused on was Max. Max is your day-to-day developer, perhaps in a larger company. Yeah, he enjoys what he does, but his job and his career is not the most important thing for him. He also kind of like enjoys being with the family and going home on time. So it's kind of like your normal, average day-to-day guy. So those were the two key people we focused, or we tried to solve the problem for. The next part, we stay on the people side, is the stakeholder section. Usually this should be very easy. The key call out here is keep it as small as possible. Ideally, you have one person in there. I know this is sometimes not possible. And I know in larger companies, it's actually fairly hard sometimes actually understanding who your stakeholder is and where do you get kind of like input on. So in this instance, we got Mike, our CEO, and Bill, the group product manager for Confluence, as our key stakeholders. Oops, we already run all the way down. Next session is team. Again, this should be very easy to fill in. Truth is, very often you have shared resources, and this actually brings this to the fore, because then you end up like, whoa, okay, I'm working on this one, but also on the other one. So we struggled with this, especially when we work cross-product and cross-company. As I said, designers are very scarce. So we actually highlighted, whoa, we might not have a designer on this team, or we only can work a little bit. How do we actually address this as a team? So in this case, we had Sharif as the PM, Hank the designer, Dave the dev lead, and Peggy the developer. So we list all the guys up there. Again, keep it as small as possible. We usually work in teams 5 to 8. Anything bigger than 10 makes it very hard to get anything through very quickly. So having covered the people side of things, now we start focusing on the value. What do we actually plan to ship? What kind of like outcome do we want to produce for our customers? And it's not only for our customers and user. Of course, it's also for us. Like, we are a business, so we need to build something that's viable. Otherwise, the whole business goes down, and we can't help customers anymore. So in this instance, faster creation, more content, better structure, learn the tool faster, and from a business perspective, higher engagement. We know that engagement means that actually our sales numbers will go up, so there's a correlation between engagement and sales numbers, and then of course, booking uptake. The key thing about the value box is, ideally you have it measurable. So everything what you actually produce, you should be able to measure it. Again, that's easier said than done. I would say in 50 to 70%, we still struggle to actually get measurable stuff in there. Might it be because we don't have the analytics in place yet, or we can't even get analytics because it's behind the firewall. But try to be as measurable as possible, because this helps you align the team early on. So interestingly, now we are already kind of like more than half through the whole workshop. We only now start to talk about ideas. And we do this very rapidly, so we have a couple of sessions, kind of like short sprints, 5 minutes perhaps in the workshop, and just write very quickly down on Post-it notes, what kind of ideas could we have to address the hypothesis which we set out there. And then we synthesized this, and in this instance, what we came up with was we could have smart templates. Like we already had templates in Confluence, so we could make them a little bit smarter with form fields or all kinds of things. Of course, wizards come to mind very quickly. And then how can we actually promote a create action any better? So those were a few ideas we had early on. The next box is about the minimum viable experience. Like people who have read the Lean Startup and minimal viable product is probably something what you're familiar with. We used this as a starting point, but then actually moved it on, or pushed it forward, and we are talking about a minimal viable experience for the reason that when we kept talking about minimal viable product, it still let us focus on the feature or something what we can ship, or when it's done, like because it passes all functional tests. As soon as we started calling it minimal viable experience, people think actually broader, and how does it feel from a customer's perspective? So that's why we kept it in there, to constantly remind people it's all about the experience people have on the other side. So sometimes small details like the right color or the right detailed interaction does matter, sometimes not. But that's what we wanted to bring to the fore. So in this instance, what we said, the earliest we can go out to customer, like as a real product, is we need to have 3 templates or 3 things in place to actually show them what we wanted to, support them with creating pages. And then on the other hand, we had to be very careful of not slowing down the power users, because they were currently, like previously before we had this, they were the kind of like our key users in Confluence. They know how to operate it very quickly, so we can't slow them down. So this is the last box of the middle section, which covers all the details. Now coming to the lower parts of the experience canvas, we got the end-to-end demo. When you work in an agile fashion, you usually have a demo and a retro at the end of each iteration. The interesting thing is, you usually only demo your feature. What we started to do and ask people from the very beginning on, tell us an end-to-end story. So this means also, like in some certain instances, so how does a customer actually purchase Confluence? When they go in, what's the first experience? And then they probably want to create a page or something in there. How do we show this? And then you actually do this stuff, and what happens afterwards? So this is actually a fairly long story, and the feature what we are focusing on is actually fairly small in there. But by having people constantly repeating this end-to-end story, they got a lot more exposed on how does it really feel from a customer's perspective. And in early stages, we have people role-play this thing, doing quick sketches, building paper prototypes. In later stages, this become interactive prototypes, and then later on, the real product. So in this instance, we agreed on, let's do a few quick sketches and sketch this out in more detail. On the right-hand side, then we have the sister part to the end-to-end demo is, how can we actually test and see what we just demoed actually worked for our customers? So early on, this might be paper prototyping, or you go out with paper prototype to usability tests. Later on, you build something to more refined usability tests. You might do remote usability tests, or you do A/B testing, whatever works for you at any given stage. In this instance, we agreed on, let's do some usability tests for paper prototype. And in this instance, we actually had the first paper prototypes out within, I believe, 4 or 5 days. Did some quick usability testing internally, and then immediately went out to some customers. So this pretty much fills up the whole experience canvas. And you might have asked yourself the question, so why did you jump around in those boxes and not start at the very top and actually fill it in from the top to the left and then the right and all those ways? So the experience canvas is optimized for reading and not for filling in. When you actually fill it in, you might sometimes struggle to fill in one of those boxes. And that's actually a very good thing, because the experience canvas acts as a catalyst and brings to the fore that we are not aligned as a team yet. And this is actually the whole purpose of the experience canvas. How can we align the team very early on and set a high-level vision which we can work towards? What we then do with the experience canvas, or usually after the workshop, is we write them up and put them on Confluence. And after each iteration, we check in again on the experience canvas and check, where are we at? Are we still on track? Or do we need to change something? So then we adapt the experience canvas slightly. And in some instances, we might pivot completely and actually find like, whoa, the solutions we came up with, they actually don't address the hypothesis at all, so it doesn't work, so let's pivot. And in rare cases, we shut the whole thing down because we actually realized, well, the whole hypothesis wasn't even worth stating because customers don't have the problem. We started somewhere wrong. But it forces us actually to make those calls, and sometimes those are very hard calls. Also, when you see the experience canvas, the top part and the middle part, they usually stay fairly stable. The bottom two parts, the end-to-end demo and the test results, they get updated pretty much every iteration, and you can constantly roll forward and keep them updated. So this experience canvas now acts kind of like as a guide throughout our whole project. So what did we end up with for Confluence? So this was actually the start for Confluence Blueprints. And what you see today, or what Bill and Matt shared today in the State of the Union for Confluence, that's what we ended up with. And now we brought Blueprints actually to the next level and have it on Space Blueprints. We also started having Blueprints in Jira. And that's how we started. Started with an hypothesis, started playing around. We started with only launching with 3-4 blueprints. Now it's a plug-in point. More people can build more blueprints, and we see actually how it's evolving. So you might ask yourself, so does this actually work in real using this experience canvas, and how did you actually get this going? Well, it does. I just did a search on our internal Confluence instance, and we have about 100 plus experience canvases up there already. And we started this whole process about 8 to 10 months ago from the need of how can we align the teams and how can we get the designers out there. And it was amazing how organically this grew, and we have now experience canvas from kind of like feature-based, like what we have here is Bitbucket notifications, how can we handle notifications better in Bitbucket, over how can we align and harmonize our search experience and ask a question experience across all our support properties. But it doesn't stop here, it goes all the way to, hey, our internal developer education, how can we help developers internally to get up to speed quicker. So for me, it was quite amazing to see how broad the experience canvas get used. And now the QA guys are using it, the marketing guys are using it. Of course, the designers driving it forward, product managers. So it gets used all over the place. And that's how it feels like, just a couple of pictures how we actually do these things. Usually we come into the room and then we draw a massive experience canvas either on one of those whiteboards or one, like most of our walls in our meeting rooms are actually all whiteboards or windows which we can write on. And then we fill them in together with Post-its, we include the whole team, and we just keep filling them in and iterating on it. Of course, this does sound too good. It wasn't such a smooth ride. We learned quite a lot going through this stuff. Like, we had the luxury of growing this organically, but what we learned was also that different people started doing this, and some of them just kind of like followed the play or used the experience canvas, but didn't fully understand how to use it best. So what we had also was kind of like people having a negative reaction. Why do we need this? We already have specs. Is it just another document? What's the purpose of it? And one of the reasons why this came to the fore is because it might have been in a session where the session didn't run that well. Or it might have been that the purpose wasn't introduced. Why are we having this, and if they still need specs or not? So what we learned is every time we actually introduce something new, we need to get some lightweight training around. And that's what we are now focusing a lot more. Like we keep growing the Atlassian design playbook, but we are now also starting training around it and not just handing out those stuff, and have more kind of like a snowball approach. We constantly roll it out and make it bigger. Good. So to wrap it up, I'd love you, or I have probably 3 takeaways for you guys. So what we set out to do is address 3 problems. One was how to get designers involved into agile teams. The second was how can we scale design? And the third was how can we align an agile team towards a longer vision? So the 3 takeaways what I have for you is, 1, innovation in process may trump innovation in product, but innovation in both trumps either. So this is a quote from Bill Buxton, and Bill Buxton is one of the legends in human-computer interaction. And And this is a quote I came across when I wrote my PhD, I don't know, 5, 8 years ago, which constantly keeps resonating with me. When you actually design something, you need to adapt your process and your approach to what you design. It's not about kind of like focusing on the product or the feature or whatever you do. You actually constantly need to adapt slightly. And that's what the playbook is all about, and also the design guidelines are all about. They're always built to be adaptable and move forward. But to be able to actually adapt, you need to learn to play as a team and actually accept that playing together is very powerful. Failing together is very powerful. Allowing this uncertainty and embracing this uncertainty is key what you do. And then, of course, the other part is you need to become a team. And how can you become a team is one of the key things. And then the last one is, the more tangible one, the experience canvas. So you see the experience canvas as a starting point for you guys to actually start playing around with your process, with your tools, and see it as a starting point. But please acknowledge that it's only a starting point. So those are pretty much the 3 takeaways for you. Before I jump into questions, I got a few recommendations out there. So if you're interested in how to get designers involved in Agile teams, there are 2 very good books out there. One is Agile Experience Design from Lindsay Radcliffe, and the other one is Lean UX from Jeff Gotthelf. Both of them are very good reads. And we will publish a blog post about the experience canvas tomorrow, and we plan to share a lot more about the Atlassian design playbook in the future. So we follow a similar approach to the Atlassian design guidelines, where we not just share the artifacts, but also how we actually do this. Thank you. Any questions?
Did you say that the deck's going to be available online too?
Yes, as far as I know, we actually share the talks as a video and also the decks.
Correct. All of the presentations should be online, including a screen flow of the slides that are happening.
So I recently learned that one of our designers wants to start with a content first design approach, as opposed to looking more at the UX and the experience and things like that. Is that sort of the gist of what I've been hearing today?
Generally, a content-first approach, yes, is a good thing. Rather than saying a content-first approach I would say, what's the most important thing for your end users in there? If it's the content, of course, start with the content. If it's not the content, then don't start with the content. So in our instance, how we designed actually our software, and Matt shared this earlier, is we tried to get all the Chrome to the background, so that kind of like the issues, the Confluence content comes to the fore. So it's all about the stuff what users are filling in there needs to be the strongest. But talking with designers, yes, I generally would give them an advice. Get your content right early on, and usually when designers come to me and have mock-ups and they have lorem ipsum in there or something like this, it's usually a no-go because they didn't think through all the details. They just kind of like polished something and it looks good, but they didn't think through what is actually the real crux of the whole thing. So what story do you want to tell? So yeah, generally content first is a good thing. I actually have a question for you guys. So 50% of the people were still standing with working Agile and having designers on the team. How are you doing this? Are you struggling? Does it work? Give me any tips. Don't be shy.
We've got about 30 developers and exactly 1 designer. He's swamped, absolutely swamped. I'd love to talk to you about scaling that, but essentially we treat him as any other team member. We've broken off into roughly 3 teams. He exists on 1 and he's shared amongst the others, and we trip over it constantly. So I can't, unfortunately, share anything spectacular for you.
Okay, thank you. Any other more stories you want to share how you deal with bringing designers on your teams? Cool. Thank you all.